Hello, twisted humans.
Do you find yourself wanting to know more about the latest murder, conspiracy, cult, or haunting?
Then this is the podcast for you. I'm Alicia.
And I'm Sierra, and this is Twisted and Uncorked. Hello and welcome to episode 100.
I feel like we need that. I
was waiting for you to say it. Yeah.
She heard it coming, guys. I think I did that on episode 50 too.
We have made it to 100 episodes. We are so excited to, still be doing this for you guys and that you guys are still listening.
I know, that's the weird part, that you're still here. It's like, oh.
It's great.
Oh, they're still the same. Oh, that's good. Our audio is better. We are less awkward.
Mm-hmm.
But...
She says as she licks her fingers.
You know what? That was unintentional, but it works. I am going to a dentist appointment after this episode. I know, super exciting night, so I have to eat my dinner now, and I touched my plate, and it was gross. Anyways, that's not important. What is important, though, is today's story that we are telling you.
Yes, you made it all the way to episode 100, so we are going to reward you with
a
really crazy case.
Yes. I'm so excited. Sierra's been working really hard, as I'm sure you've noticed, episodes 94 till now, about her being bummed out about the book she's been reading.
Yes.
And how she's read happy books in between. We've seen the evolution of all the hard work you've put into this research, so I want to say thank you also. As we had back-to-back 100th episode and serial killer episodes, we had to split it up, but I appreciate it. So, because it would have been crazy.
Definitely. In all of my stress, I started vaping again, but don't worry, I'm giving it up, I swear.
Very quick. I know, right? Today is the first day of February that we were recording this, so the first day of our dry February. And she's taken up vaping. She's replaced one thing with another. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, just sometimes, things get stressful. I'm also trying to wean myself off of caffeine, so that doesn't help.
Oh, good God. So, why are you doing this to yourself? No alcohol and no caffeine in a whole month? Man.
Well, I'm weaning off of caffeine. I still have it sometimes, but at the beginning of the year, like the first 2 weeks of the year, I literally had either coffee or a Celsius every single day. And I was like, I think my kidneys hurt. This is probably bad.
Does caffeine affect your kidneys?
I
know alcohol does. Like when I drink a lot, the next day.
Well, alcohol is really bad for liver.
Yeah.
Kidney stones are formed by having too much caffeine, basically.
Oh.
So.
I'm going to knock on wood right now. Because that's never happened to me, but I drink an egregious amount of caffeine. Like the large Yeti cups, I drink one of those every morning. And then sometimes
coffee?
Yeah. Yeah. And then sometimes by like 3 o'clock in the afternoon at work, I make another mug.
It's mostly, I don't know if it's specifically caffeine, but it is high caffeine drinks. So coffee is not, I don't think, one of them that causes the kidney stones. It's energy drinks, Celsius, things like that. It's I'm going to say the wrong thing, MSG or the
artificial caffeine,
the salt or I don't know, something that's in it that's not good for you.
If you are a scientist, as we are clearly not, let us know.
Or a doctor. Not a doctor.
Why did I go with scientist? And the whole time that you were saying kidney stones, I was going kidney stones, like from Friends.
Oh my goodness.
We don't watch a lot of TV, guys, if you can't tell. Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Friends are our recent
yeah, those are the go-tos.
The go-to quotes. And Gilmore Girls.
Anyway, let's stop rambling and get into some fun facts.
Anyone that listens to the show, / that knows me, knows that my favorite movie, arguably, is Nightmare Before Christmas. And one thing that I did not know is that it's based off of a poem. The entire movie is based off of a poem.
What? What poem?
'Twas the night before Christmas. So it's based off of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. So Tim Burton took that poem and wrote a dark poem corresponding it, and then wrote the movie based off of that. He's always been into creepy stuff, surprise, surprise. And as a way of honoring his creepy self, he decided to tell his kids his version of The Night Before Christmas. And they loved it so much that he turned it into the movie.
Can you imagine having a dad that's like, oh, you love when I read you bedtime stories? Let me make a movie for
Right?
you.
Well, like,
Come on,
even the
Dad, get with
song
it.
Kidnap Mr. Sandy Claus? Like, that's so, like, some of the things they say in there, I'm like, what? Children listen to this?
It's pretty interesting.
Something about a foot in a sock covered in gook, and it's like, no, you may not.
My fun fact is not as fun as that. It's from my giant book of fun facts.
Oh,
and
well, that's just fun on its own.
It is that the idea of a tip for a waiter or a waitress, they used to, in 17th century, they had they had restaurants, they had a box at, the stand or whatever, that they wrote on it to ensure promptness. And basically, any diners who came in who wanted to be served first to ensure their promptness would put a little extra money in there. And if you didn't put the extra money in there, well, you're last in line.
Fucking rights. That should still exist to this day.
Right, but also, I mean, yes, because you're going to a restaurant anyway, but also it's very much like, let me throw my wealth in your face so that you treat me better. Mm-hmm. So it's a little weird.
I mean,
a little weird for me.
As somebody that served for a very long time, I had to be nice to the dicks of the world. In hopes that they would tip me well, so.
Right. Yeah, it sucks when then they don't. So I agree that there should be some sort of an upfront, like, I need to know how you're going to treat me before I can treat you. However, it would be really nice if that was just reflected in their actual paycheck. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. I think every meal should come with a mandatory 20%. You know how they do, we mandatorily take 20% for
like if you serve
big
a big
tables.
Group. Yeah,
right.
I agree.
You should just do 20% either way. Mandatory 20%. Be prepared. Unless you can walk up to the counter your damn self. Be prepared to give 20%.
I know. But as it is dry February, like I mentioned earlier, and speaking of restaurants, Sierra should be a goddamn bartender because this is delicious. What are we drinking
Well, I
today?
didn't invent it. I just found it. It is a margarita mocktail.
Fucking delightful.
It is really good. It's made with fresh strawberries. Look, I put a little heart-shaped strawberry there. But it's made with fresh strawberries, limeade concentrate, and basil. And ice. That's it. You just blend it all up. And it's delicious. I'm so glad I found something with basil in it, though, because Jesse hates my basil plant.
Why?
He's like, it smells like asshole. No, it smells fucking delicious.
Okay, if his asshole smells like basil, he's doing life right.
But I feel like I can never use it. Probably.
I love basil in drinks. I throw it on top of like spaghetti after I've cooked it, like just for a fresh little oomph. He's missing out.
Yeah, he's crazy.
What would you rate this drink?
I think I would rate it a 9. I would say 10, but it's a little sour for my liking. I don't like sour very much. I also think that, just because we're doing dry February doesn't mean you all have to do dry February. This would be great if you wanted to top it off with tequila. Yeah.
Yeah. Throw some Nick Jonas tequila in there. Ooh.
Yeah.
That will happen in March. But super good. And then friendly reminder, guys, the links below for the 2 foundations
charities
that we're working with for Cancer Society are there. So you can donate accordingly. Or if you want a little something for yourself, you can join Patreon this month. Or you can buy some merch. Then you get your donations worth and something fun.
Yeah. It's the best way to do it.
Yes. So thank you guys so much for your support. And if you're going dry with us, kudos to you. Because it is Wednesday, but it has been a week already. So.
All right. Before we get into our 100th episode, we do have to take a real quick break. A real quick break. to hear from Lady Teal's Curios. All right, let's get into the 100th episode. So today...
Damn it, I had food in my mouth. Every time you say 100th episode, I was going to go... Pew, pew, pew.
All the laughs are out of the way. It's not going to be fun from here. For our 100th episode today, we are covering the West Memphis Three. And I know that this case has been covered by a lot of people. It's a really big case. This one is very near and dear to our hearts. We, grew up in the 90s. We talk about witchcraft. We have people in our lives who judge us for it. And also, recently I found out that one of my friends is related to both Damien Eccles and Jessie Misskelley. So that's interesting.
Very cool.
But anyway, today's episode is not about Damien or Jessie or Jason, but about Christopher, Stephen, and Michael. So, we are going to jump right into it and get to the crime. This is the hardest and saddest part, so if you already know what we're about to say about these victims and you don't want to hear this part, skip ahead about 3 minutes to just get into the investigation part. Trigger warning for child abuse, child death, possible child torture, and child sexual assault. On Thursday, May 6th, 1993, at about 2 p.m., the naked bodies of 3 8-year-old boys, Christopher Byers, Michael Moore, and Stevie Branch, were found submerged in a gully turned stream filled with runoff water and mud. All 3 boys were bound with their own shoelaces, their left hands bound to the left ankle, right hands to the right ankle. Their backs were arched in a way that made their bellies point up at the sky, and their groins were on display.
Oh my god.
All 3 boys were badly beaten in the head, but the scene was even more worse than that. Was even more worse is not correct grammar. Sorry. The scene was even worse than that. All of the boys had small slashes or scratches to their face and other parts of their bodies, usually in 3 parallel lines at a time. The violence inflicted to Michael Moore's head suggested that someone with extreme rage had injured him. The face of Stevie Branch seemed to have a gaping wound near his jaw that looked like a bite was taken from it. And Christopher Byers had what the autopsy reporter classified as a belt buckle mark on his face. He had also been castrated, his scrotum removed, his penis skinned, and his groin punctured with stab wounds. They believed that 2 of the boys may have also had urine and water in their stomachs, meaning that they had drowned. Also in the water with the boys were their clothes. Their shirts and pants had been staked down with a stick, as if the person or people who put them there were trying to keep them from floating to the top. Their pants were noted as being inside out, but still buttoned and zipped. The significance of this is never really touched on in the investigation, but many people believe that inside out and still buttoned and zipped suggests that the boys took their clothes off themselves and possibly in a hurry. And as evidence, it was noted that Christopher and Michael's arms and legs were all tied up the same way, while Stevie's were tied different from theirs, and also one side was tied differently from the other side, as if the person who had tied his left wrist to his left leg was not the same person who had tied Stevie's right wrist to his right leg. There was also skin found in one of the ligatures that was believed to not belong to any of the boys. And then the sheet that the police threw over Christopher's body, when it was later removed by the coroner, it had a single quote-unquote negroid hair on it. There was no blood found at the scene.
That's no. Everybody take a breath. If you are drinking, take a drink.
Right?
God damn it. I wish I had one right now. I have full body chills. That never gets easier to hear. And Sierra is sharing more details than some, which is why she gave you the trigger warning. But what happened to them is important.
Other evidence collected, either from the scene or from persons of interest, were 18 knives, 3 wooden sticks, 1 tire billy, 1 ice axe, 3 hammers, a hook, a rope, hair samples from 41 people, blood and urine samples from 11 people, footprint impressions, shoes, boxes of clothes, and a mason jar filled with water. They also took hair samples. Right? Well, I think it was water from the ditch to make sure that they had swallowed it and drowned.
Yeah.
They also took hair samples from all of the family members and blood and urine samples from Stevie's and Christopher's stepdads. All right. So that was the worst of it. Now we are going to talk about all the steps that the police took before and after the boys' bodies were found. On May 5th, 1993, the day before the bodies were found, it was a Wednesday, and as 8-year-olds do, the 3 boys attended school. They went to school in the morning like usual, they stayed at school all day like usual, and they came home from school. But on Wednesday night, all 3 boys had disappeared. The first boy to be reported missing was Christopher Byers. His stepdad, John Mark Byers, called the West Memphis Police Department at about 8 p.m. to report that Christopher was missing. He said he had last seen Christopher at about 5:30 p.m. The officer got a description of the child and then left as she had been dispatched to another call. So this is kind of the first sign of like, you just got a description and left? This kid's 8. Where are you going? Where are you going, lady? The next call was from the Bojangles restaurant about a mile away. The officer pulled through the drive-thru to talk to the employees about the call that came in. The manager told the officers that a muddy, bleeding, or bloody black man who seemed mentally disoriented came into the restaurant and went into the women's restroom. He was in there for a bit, and then he had left and was just hanging around outside for a while. But by the time the officer arrived, he had gone. The manager said that in the bathroom there was blood smeared all over the walls. Again, the officer wrote down the information and left, having never gotten out of her patrol car, and headed to the next dispatched call. Which, by the way, I don't know how it goes in West Memphis, but having been a patrol officer in the military, they don't dispatch you unless you say that you're clear. So, at least in my recollection of how police patrolling works, this police officer had to have said to dispatch, yeah, I'm clear, I'll go to the next one. So, like, it's not like the dispatch was like, nope, sorry that there's blood there, you gotta leave. She chose to leave.
Okay. That's good to know, because even if this person was responsible and you took no samples of that, like, not knowing what's going to happen later, but, like...
Right.
It just...
Didn't even get out of your car.
It's lazy.
Yes, so lazy.
Unless she was thinking maybe it was because of the mentally ill description that it was possibly just his own blood, but still,
right.
Like...
Yeah,
take that shit down.
And even with the kid, with Christopher Byers in the first call, she took his information and left. He's 8. Mm-hmm. He's not a kid that...
He's not like a 12-year-old boy that's going to hang out with his friends in the neighborhood and just didn't tell his mom. Yeah, he's a baby.
Okay. So she headed to the next dispatched call, which was someone calling about people throwing eggs at their house. And then directly after that, at 9:24 p.m., she responded to another missing person report across the street from the Byers' house, where she just was. This is where Michael Moore lived.
Oh.
Michael's mother said she had last seen her son riding bikes with his friends Christopher Byers and Stevie Branch. She had sent her daughter to go out and tell Michael to come home, but Michael's sister could not find him. At the same time that Michael's mother was reporting this to the officer, another officer had been dispatched to a catfish restaurant a few blocks away where Stevie's mom worked. Stevie's stepdad had gone to her work to pick her up. When he arrived, he used the payphone to call the police to tell them that his stepson had not returned home. When his wife came out of work, he let her know that Stevie hadn't come home yet, and he had already called the police. They immediately started searching for Stevie, with his mother still in her work clothes. After 100 episodes of podcasting, and nearly 30 years of being interested in true crime, we know that usually police start with the people closest to the victims, find their alibis, and then work their way out. Unfortunately, in this case, Police skipped right over the part where they were supposed to investigate the family members. Maybe they were trying to spare the grieving family members, but without really questioning them, they had a hard time finding anyone with any motive to hurt these boys.
Because they're babies. Like, what motive would you have unless you're just an absolute piece of shit?
Yeah. Of the 3 boys, Michael Moore was the only one whose parents were still married. Michael was 4 feet tall, 60 pounds, with brown hair and blue eyes. He was a Boy Scout and was last seen wearing his Boy Scout uniform.
They are all cute, but something about that face just kills me.
Having the most quote-unquote normal life, there is little information to share about him today. Only his mother was home when he went missing, and his father was working out of town. Michael had gone over and asked to ride bikes with Stevie. Stevie was allowed to go, but was supposed to be home by 4:30 so that he could come with his parents to drop off his mother at work. After Stevie had already gone off with Michael, Christopher came over to Stevie's house to play, but Stevie's mother told him that Stevie was already out with Michael. Christopher hung out with Stevie's sister for a bit, and then went out, presumably to look for the boys. Christopher had the most busy day of the kids, from what we know. He and Michael had lived across the street from each other, like I said, right near the school. But he didn't come straight home from school. He went immediately to talk to other kids in the neighborhood. One of those kids is Stevie, and that's when Stevie's mom, talked with him and told him that the kids weren't there anymore. He played with Stevie's sister. Because he didn't come straight home when he got out of school at 2:55 like he was supposed to, the family wasn't home when he finally went to his own house, and he was locked out. His stepdad had gotten home that day about 3:10 p.m. from a doctor's appointment. He left again at 3:50 to take his older son to the police station because he was a witness in a traffic dispute. When his stepdad left, he hadn't even seen Christopher yet that day. It's about 5 p.m. when Michael goes home to check in, and Stevie goes home to check in, but Stevie's family is already gone too, having taken his mom to work. And it is believed at this time Stevie's house was unlocked. He went inside to eat some peas that his mom left out for him before she was driven to work by her husband. Michael, after checking in with his mom, goes off to play with another friend, and again, Christopher, being locked out of his house, he decides to continue playing outside, but right there in front of his own house, on a skateboard.
Aww.
Christopher's stepdad gets home at 5:30 p.m. to drop his mother off after picking her up from work. When Christopher's stepdad gets home, he sees Christopher playing in the street on a skateboard and yells at him. Not just yells. He admitted to police that he gave Christopher 2 or 3 licks with a belt and then make him clean the carport as punishment. But then...
Sorry. So he is in trouble because he's locked out of his own house.
Well, technically, he's in trouble because he didn't come home from school. He wouldn't have been locked out if he was home when his stepdad was home.
Okay. Still,
but yeah.
Seems like a harsh reaction.
And for playing in the street.
Also, he was the one that had the belt mark on his face, right? Or the buckle mark?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense then. Ugh. Still seems like a harsh reaction as kids that grew up in the 90s.
Yeah. His stepdad will tell you he hit him in the butt over his jeans with this belt.
Oh, not in the face. Oh,
Correct.
Interesting.
Christopher's dad leaves again to pick up, stepdad, by the way, to pick up his older son from the police station. And Christopher is mad as an 8-year-old can be, and he plans to run away. He meets back up with Stevie and Michael, Stevie having gone to Michael's house after he ate the peas his mom left for him, and they all go play together in the woods. Christopher's stepdad says he got home at 6:20 p.m., saw that Christopher was no longer cleaning the carport. In one account, he says he immediately set out looking for Christopher. On another account, he said after it got dark and he had reported them missing, then he went out looking. Christopher's older brother Ryan also went out looking with some friends separate from his father, and he claimed that while he was looking in the woods that night, he heard at least 3 loud splashes in the water, and possibly some gunshots. But he was scared, and him and his friends just ran off.
Normal kid reaction.
Right. Also, I'll get to it later, but as they're looking out in the woods, the police are not. The police did not start looking that night. They didn't look till the next morning. So, let's talk about Christopher.
In West Memphis deserved 3 good licks, in my opinion. Okay?
Let's talk about Christopher Byers' family life for a minute, because it was a lot less normal, and a lot more is known about him and his family. He was 4 feet 4 inches, 50 pounds, with light brown hair and eyes. He was a troublesome kid, according to his parents, but others might actually describe him as a troubled kid. Christopher's birth father was not around. He was being raised by his stepdad, John Mark Byers, who was said to have adopted Christopher when he was about 5. John Mark Byers, who went by Mark, was a very sketchy guy. Starting with the fact that he apparently did not, quote-unquote, have anything to do with the Moores, who literally lived across the street. The Byers would apparently have a lot of parties, and the Moores would have to call the police to get the Byers' guests to stop parking on their lawn. Mark Byers referred to Stevie as Christopher's best friend, even though it was clear that Michael was the one he was closest to, both in friendship and geographically.
So he just did not like this family.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be pissed off if somebody was parking on my lawn too, and I would report it, but that's not a reason to have a grudge against a family. Like,
well, yeah, so he's the one whose friends are parking it on
that's
them.
what I mean. That's not a good enough reason to have a grudge against somebody. I would be like, I'm so sorry. Like, I hope they
tell your
didn't do
friends
too
to
much
stop
damage.
fucking parking on their lawn.
Yeah, that's a dick move. People work hard on their gardens and landscaping. Yeah. Respect nature, people. We have to tell you this every episode.
Mark had many children with multiple women and an ex-wife who he had a history of domestic abuse with, though this was not reported in any of the police reports. Actually, it was hard information to find because it was mysteriously expunged from his record.
Oh, weird how that happens.
What happened was, after Mark and his ex-wife divorced, he had gone to her home and threatened her with a taser, trying to take the children they had together. He threatened to kill her and told her he wanted full custody.
Fuck does that?
A neighbor called police, stating that the woman who lived next door was screaming, and when police came, they diffused the situation, sent the ex-wife to stay with a friend where she would feel safer, and sent Mark on his way. But his ex-wife knew something like this would happen one day, and she had actually set up a tape recorder in her home that night. So the next day, she used her own evidence from that night as proof of his instability and violence and asked for a restraining order.
Yes, girl. Smart.
Mark Byers was convicted of the domestic violence and was sentenced to 3 years of probation without jail time, under the condition that he stayed employed and kept up on his child support payments. But he could not keep a job, and he did not keep up on his child support payments.
Shocking.
He never got in trouble for it, though.
Of course not.
Part of the reason may have been that Mark Byers was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And as Shonda Rhimes has taught us, a brain tumor will cause you to do things that are very out of character. But I'm not going to give anyone that benefit of the doubt.
No,
you don't beat people.
Giving all of the facts.
You don't threaten people.
If anyone's not seen a photo of him, do a quick Google search if you're not on our social media as you're listening to this, which you should be. He looks like a piece of shit. Like, I don't like to judge a book by his cover, but he looks mean.
He does look
mean. And crusty and just nah.
I read a book and I watched kind of 4 documentaries, but technically 2. The first 3 had the same name. They were just in different parts. One came out in like 1996, one came out in 2011, and one came out in like 2017 or some shit. I don't know. Anyway, I watched a lot of documentaries. He's in all of them.
He's
willingly.
The worst looking
He's
man.
a little...
Does he sound
he
like
has
he
a
looks?
brain tumor.
Okay.
He sounds like he has a brain tumor. So, anyway, whatever the reason, Mark Byers actually became really close friends with the West Memphis Police Department. He and his current wife, Melissa, Christopher's mother, both became confidential drug informants for the police. We don't know exactly what they did as drug informants, because it's confidential, but we do know that they lived in a really nice house for him never having a real job. His only jobs were always just reselling things at local flea markets or as a pawnbroker, buying things from people who wanted quick cash and then selling them to others for more. But that rabbit hole actually takes us down a long and crazy story about the West Memphis Police Department, which I will get to in just 1 minute. First, I need to let you know why Mark Byers' felony domestic violence charge was never talked about in the case of the three boys. So exactly 1 year before the murders, in May of 1992, Mark Byers' criminal record was expunged. It was completely removed. According to Mara Leverett, by the way, Mara Leverett wrote the book Devil's Knot, which I read, and I didn't realize until I was deep into it. She also wrote the book that I read based on the Boys on the Tracks
Oh, funny.
episode. Yeah.
She's got a type of case she likes to dive into.
Yeah, maybe we should interview her. According to Mara Leverett, quote, the judge's ruling allowed Byers to state in any application form for employment, license, civil right, or privilege, or in any appearance as a witness, that he had not been convicted of the offense. End quote. So, literally, he could say that the domestic violence never happened, and it would not legally be a lie for him to say that. Legally, that's the truth, because the judge declared, by law, he does not have to say that this ever happened.
My eye is actually twitching with rage.
Yeah, like, what the fuck?
Really?
In
How?
what
Is it
earth
because
does
of his
this
best buddy friendship with these police officers? Like,
Pretty much. And I mean, either that or they feel sorry for him because he has a
my
brain tumor.
best friend used to be a police officer. Where's my benefits? Like, fuck. No, I'm joking. That's wrong. You shouldn't use positions of power in any situation
Yeah.
to benefit somebody that is this shitty. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And Mark Byers continued to get in trouble and continued to get away with it. In July, 2 months after that was expunged, he was charged with conspiracy to sell cocaine and carrying a dangerous weapon. He was arrested, but then released the same night. Then at Christmas...
Cocaine? Oh my god.
Yeah. Then at Christmas, he was suspected of felony theft, but let go. And then at the time of the murders, he was being investigated for an insurance claim against UPS, where he claimed they never delivered his package that contained an $11,000 Rolex watch, even though they had proof it was actually delivered. So,
Also, why is he ordering $11,000 Rolex watches? Who can afford
for his
that?
flea market, of course.
God damn it, woman. Sorry, that's not the point to be made here. I'm just like...
The West Memphis Police Department were a small-town police department who had never really dealt with a criminal case of this magnitude. But when the state police asked if they wanted assistance, West Memphis Police said no. They asked them to stay away. They said they had it under control. But there's a reason for this. West Memphis Police Department was trying to prove themselves as good cops. Because... during the time of the boys' murders, the police department was actually under investigation by the Arkansas State Police for drug-related crimes. Many officers in the West Memphis Police Department were being accused, and some even admitted to selling or pawning drugs and guns and other evidence that was confiscated from criminals. Money that was confiscated would also go missing. One officer actually sold an undercover police car. He's just like, I don't need this anymore. You want it?
Fuck.
The pawnbroker.
Needing a quick dime, but damn.
The pawnbroker that these police officers frequented most with this illegal evidence was Mark Byers, Christopher's dad.
I was wondering when that pawn shop was going to come back into play.
Yeah, that was the rabbit hole. Let's get back to Christopher now. As I was saying before, he was a troubled, or as his parents said, troublesome kid. Christopher's mother, Melissa, had actually told police that she thought her son may have been sexually assaulted in the past. Starting when he was only 5 years old, she and her husband Mark started seeing behavioral issues in Christopher. Coincidentally, this is the same time when Mark officially adopted him.
Oh my god.
Multiple times throughout the next 3 years until his death, Christopher was taken to multiple different doctors and put on multiple different medications, but his parents never kept up with his appointments to the same doctors. It is believed by some that his parents may have been taking or selling Christopher's prescribed medications. These were all behavioral doctors, like ADHD pills and whatnot. Back to the investigation part, there was actually a teacher of Christopher's that told police that after a parent-teacher conference, Mark and Melissa were heard discussing what they should do about Christopher's behavior. They mentioned something about sending him away and how they needed to get rid of him.
Oh.
But even after all of this about him being a troublesome kid, Mark specifically told police that Christopher had never disappeared from the house before, while Melissa told them that he had run away multiple times recently, and for hours at a time. The night the boys went missing, Mark also told police that he was out looking all night. He said that he came home from looking around 11, called police to ask if they were looking yet, which they weren't. Again, they decided it was too dark to look that night. They were actually going to wait until morning. And then after the phone calls to police, Mark said him and his older son went back out to look. His son Ryan said that actually his dad sent him to bed and Mark went out looking by himself. And the day that the bodies were found, Mark was heard telling police he had just looked there where the bodies were found the night before because he wondered if they may have drowned. He said he didn't see anything in the night the day before.
Or was he out getting rid of evidence?
There was eventually a short interrogation of Mark Byers that was recorded. It was very much an interview that I believe the police only did to cover their own asses in case someone asked why they didn't question him. They helped him through it, saying things like, I know you didn't do it, but I just have to ask. If I were to say someone had information that you did do it, what would you say? And he'd say, well, I would say I don't know where you would get that from. And again, the hypothetical questions just went on and on for the entire interview, and he continued to hypothetically deny. And that was it. During a later trial, not against Mark, of course, a knife comes into evidence from the hands of Mark Byers. There's actually an HBO documentary crew that is there throughout the entire trial, and Mark gives them one of his hunting knives, like as a thank you. He says that the knife had never been used, but the crew thought that they may have seen blood on it, so they turned it over as evidence. The blood on the knife was human, and it was the same blood type as both Mark Byers himself and his stepson, Christopher Byers. The stepdad and stepson happened to have the same blood type. When questioned at trial, Mark said that he didn't remember using the knife at the time of giving it away, but now he remembers that he had used it to cut his toenails and cut up some venison, and that he may have cut his own thumb with it too. Years later, as we know, DNA testing became more advanced.
You're just gonna skip past cutting your toenails with a knife, sir?
I know.
Okay,
and then venison, that's meat that you eat.
That's fucking foul.
You cut your toenails with it and your food?
Which is, like, also the worst story I've ever heard. You used it and you hurt somebody is my theory, but that's fucking foul.
It is pretty gross.
I'm sorry. I just couldn't let you skip past that. I'm like, who the actual fuck does that?
Yeah.
Like, who thinks to themselves, that's a great idea as a cover-up?
Years later, as we know, DNA testing became more advanced, and it would have been able to decipher if this blood was Christopher's or Mark's, but by then, the small amount of blood that was on there was all used up in determining the blood type. To this day, we don't know whose blood was on that knife. Now we're going to talk about the last boy, Stevie Branch. Stevie Branch was also considered to be a pretty normal kid. He was 4'2", 60 pounds, blonde hair, and blue eyes. He was a good kid and lived down the way from Christopher and Michael, who had lived across the street from each other. Stevie's parents had divorced when he was just 1 year old, and his father was ordered to pay child support while only having visitation rights while in the presence of Stevie's mother. Safe to say, he didn't visit very much. He also didn't pay child support very much. And so his work wages were being garnished.
What does that
None
mean?
of this information was included in the police report, even though it seems like it could be good motive to have a kid killed because your money's being taken away.
That's
but-
what garnished means? Like, because
Yes.
you're not willingly paying it, they're taking it from you?
Yeah, basically the government, before you even get your paycheck, the government takes some of it and gives it to the mom. Yep. But to be
that
clear,
sucks, but also is good.
yes. To be clear, the birth father did have an alibi. So even though it seems like this should have been motive and police didn't look into it, eventually it got looked into and he's not a suspect. Well, none of these people are suspects, but that's besides the point. Stevie
To the
Branch's
police.
mom... yeah.
Sorry.
Stevie Branch's mom got remarried to Terry Hobbs when Stevie was young enough that even though he knew this was his stepdad, he was still the man who raised him and the only male role model in his life. But it was the early 90s, and men figures in boys' lives were known to be physically rough. So there were rumors, of course, that Terry Hobbs hit the kid on occasion. It was just, it wasn't ever to a point that anyone considered it abusive at the time. Terry Hobbs did actually have a history of domestic violence in his last marriage, too, though. Everything I've told you so far, minus the history of domestic violence, this is all that police knew about Terry Hobbs this whole time. That's all. They never interviewed him.
Really?
They never looked into him any further. He was never questioned until more than 10 years later. The only time police spoke to him before closing this case, Pam was present and did all the talking. Though there wasn't much talking to be done. The only real thing that they asked was if they knew who Chris Morgan and Brian Holland were. Chris and Brian had an ice cream truck route that they worked on in the boys' neighborhood, and police had gotten a tip that 4 days after the boys' bodies were found, Chris and Brian left West Memphis abruptly and moved to California. West Memphis police asked California police to question the two. They were given polygraph tests, which determined that they were being deceptive, but we know how we feel about polygraphs. After a few hours of interrogation, Chris said that he was hospitalized for drugs and alcohol abuse, and maybe he did do it and just didn't remember. But there was no real evidence to link him to the crime, and after the California police told West Memphis police what had happened in the interview, West Memphis was no longer interested. Actually, police were very soon after the discovery of the bodies onto a completely different theory, but we'll get to that next week. So back to Terry Hobbs. These are all the things that police never cared to find out about him. As I mentioned, he had a past history of domestic violence. An old neighbor of his and his ex-wife's, an older woman named Mildred French, knew that Terry Hobbs was abusing his wife and treating her like a punching bag.
Oh my God.
One day, she heard the abuse and also heard their baby crying. Mildred had had enough, and she went over to confront Terry herself. He told her to mind her own business, and she told him she was making this her business, and it needed to stop.
That a girl.
A few months later, Mildred had to call the police. She said that she was out doing yard work and then came in to her own home to get a shower. When she stepped out of the shower, Terry was there. He grabbed her from behind, groping her breasts, and she screamed for him to get off and get out.
Oh my God.
He kept trying to shush her, and she kept screaming until he ran out of the house and into his own home. Of course, after she called police, he denied the whole thing.
Of course he did.
As I said, police didn't know any of this. They didn't know of the accusation because they never asked. They also didn't know that Stevie once asked his mother Pam to leave Terry because he loved his half-sister Amanda and not him.
Oh.
They didn't know that Pam's sister was keeping a secret for Stevie, that Stevie had accused Terry of making him mess with his sister while Terry watched. They didn't know that Stevie's sister Amanda would grow up addicted to drugs and later say that she has no recollection of her childhood because she suppressed it, though she often had dreams of having sex with her father. They also didn't know, at the time, that Pam found a pocket knife in Terry's toolbox, a pocket knife that she was sure was in Stevie's pocket the night he was murdered. She actually ended up turning over this knife and the information to the defense team in a later trial because she didn't trust the prosecution. Terry would later say that he took the pocket knife away because he was trying to be a good dad and it was too dangerous. But going back to that night, Pam later said that when Terry took her to work, he was wearing a tank top and shorts. But when he picked her back up, he was wearing jeans and a denim top. Pam's sister said that Terry did laundry that night, which he had never done before because that was Pam's job.
Huh. Not liking Terry.
Yeah. Still keeping in mind that police don't know any of this because they never asked, let's talk about what would later, many years later, be Terry's story for that night. 10 years later, when he was finally interrogated.
I like how you keep saying because he was never asked. It's my new favorite.
Yeah.
I see what you're doing there.
He said that he got home at 4:15 p.m. Stevie was already out with the other kids. And then he took Pam to work. Stevie's still gone. He got home around 5:30. Stevie was still not home. So he went to his buddy David Jacoby's house with his daughter to ask for help looking for Stevie. He was there for about an hour, and then they went out looking until they had to pick up Pam.
Sorry, they were there for an hour for him to ask to help.
His story doesn't make sense. Okay?
No, that's what I mean.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no.
When people lie,
already caught
their
on to
stories
that.
don't make sense. Fucking cutting your toenails with a knife? No, like when people lie, their stories don't make sense.
Okay, until he had to pick up Pam, and then the two men went out looking some more. Terry said he never saw Stevie at all that whole day. He left for school and he never saw him again. But David's story was different. David said that Terry and Amanda came over at 5:30. They played guitar for an hour, and then Terry left Amanda at David's house to go look for Stevie. And Terry didn't come back until 8:30 to pick Amanda up and take her with him to get Pam. Then David went out looking with Terry that night. On top of that, Terry's neighbor, who attended Wednesday night church and left home at 6:30, specifically remembers seeing Terry yelling to all three boys, Stevie, Michael, and Christopher, at 6:30, right before she went to church. If David and the neighbor are to be believed, Terry would have had a 2-hour period of no alibi and would have been the last person to see the boys alive. Even though police didn't know any of this at the time, they did know that less than a year after the boys' murders, Terry was charged with aggravated assault, which in my opinion should have been attempted murder. Because he got into a fight with Pam, hit her, and then shot Pam's brother in the abdomen when he tried to stick up for her. Thankfully, Pam's brother survived this shooting, But clearly, Terry is a dangerous man who was trying to kill him. Like, you don't just shoot somebody in the stomach and say, oh, sorry.
No, you tell them to mind their own business, and it's between you and your wife. You don't shoot them.
Yeah,
not
and
a
also
normal response.
don't hit your wife in the first place.
Yeah, well, that was not what I meant. I just meant that was a normal response.
Right.
Not shooting somebody.
Like I said earlier, Terry wasn't interviewed about the case until over 10 years later, after the case had already been closed and the supposed perpetrators already in jail. But the reason he was finally interviewed was because DNA testing got better. The DNA that was found tied into the knots in the shoelaces that bound the boys was tested, and it was Terry's DNA. Now, you could say that of course his DNA would be on his stepson's shoelaces if he had ever helped tie his son's shoes. But it was actually on the laces that bound Michael Moore, not his son.
This is one of those instances where I feel like DNA is not lying.
Yeah. It was also inside the actual knot. So if he was, as if he was the person who was tying that knot.
Mm-hmm.
Another bit of collected evidence at the scene proved to be Terry's friend, David Jacoby's DNA on a nearby tree. But, of course, this could have just been from looking for the boys that night. Around the time that this DNA evidence was coming to light, again, after many years and a closed case, 3 boys, now in their 20s, who were just preteens at the time of the boys' murders, came forward with more information about Terry. They were friends with Terry's nephew and took a polygraph with claims that they had overheard Terry talking to his brother saying that he regretted what he did, and then claiming that Terry's nephew, their friend, told them that his dad told him that Terry killed those 3 boys. These young adults passed their polygraphs, but again, we know how we feel about polygraphs. Just because you can pass it doesn't mean they're not useless.
Mm-hmm. But what reason do they have to come forward and lie?
Exactly.
It's not like they have a huge reward
part.
out for information
Right.
or something that would make that plausible. They have no reason.
Yeah, and it's literally 10 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Even after all this information came to light, many years later, from 2007 to 2011, the police never considered Terry to be a suspect. They actually went on the record to double down and say that Terry was not a suspect in 1993 and he is not a suspect now. God, Anyway. Because they believe the people who they arrested are the correct people. Anyway.
Why?
We'll get to it next week. None of the people that I have mentioned so far have been named as suspects. The 2 guys who ran off to California, not suspects. The man who reportedly covered in blood in Bojangles, not a suspect. Actually, the police eventually went to the Bojangles to scrape the blood off the walls as DNA samples, but it was never tested because the police supposedly lost the samples. Mark and Melissa Byers, not suspects. Terry and David, not suspects. The direction that the case took was so wild that none of these people would have fit the profile of who had done this. Mark and Melissa immediately moved out of their home after the deaths and the trial took place. Melissa died 3 years later, Mark says in her sleep. Coroners ruled the case and manner of death to be undetermined. Weird. Pam Hobbs left Terry immediately after the deaths and the trial took place, moving in with her parents as Terry was less than consolable to her pain and depression.
So weird. You'd think you'd be extra upset for doing it, maybe.
And the Moore family moved out years later. All the scrapes and cuts, the boys, the fact that there seemed to be sexual mutilation to the investigators at the time, who had let me restart that paragraph because I confused myself. All the scrapes and cuts to the boys, and the fact that there seemed to be sexual mutilation, at least to investigators at the time who had some really religious and satanic panicking people in their ears, made this all seem like an occult crime, like a satanic ritual murder. But many years later, with better science and medical examiners and pathologists who had much more experience than this small town did, we learned that none of these things even took place. Yes, the boys were beaten and murdered, but a knife was never used. Neither was a belt. Only the hands of an adult and possible blunt force objects were believed to be used. The reason for the cuts and scrapes and mutilation was actually turtles. It had all happened post-mortem. The 2 boys with water in their stomachs drowned, and the one without had probably succumbed to his head injuries before being tossed into the water. All the scratches, in lines of 3, were from turtle claws. The bite marks and what was thought to be a belt mark, and even the emasculation, was from snapping turtles in the water, nibbling at the boys' dead bodies.
Turtle claws.
Snapping turtle.
Okay, they do have claws, but they have 4.
Yeah, but
3.
the last one's kind of behind. 3
Not
long ones?
really.
Oh, are you looking
They're
at the
all about
snapping
same
turtle?
leg. Yeah.
The one that I saw in the
Maybe
video.
it's just a photo. Maybe. Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway.
I don't like it. Also, I don't know much of turtles being like... Also, snapping turtles are terrifying. Separate
Yeah,
level.
terrifying.
But I don't know them to be... What's the word I'm looking for? Scavengers? Like...
Well, the video that I watched is really disturbing, but they put snapping turtles into a pool with a dead pig, and
why, Sierra?
it
These
does
go on the list of
exactly
things that you don't tell me.
it does exactly to the pig what recent pathologists have said happened to these boys.
Okay. Still don't like it. Maybe turtles were responsible for that part only.
Oh, of course. Somebody else put the boys in the water and tied them up.
I don't know. Turtles are pretty nefarious at times.
The bite marks and what was thought to be a belt mark, and even the emasculation, was from snapping turtles in the water nibbling at the boys' dead bodies. This explains why there was no blood at the scene. They didn't really bleed a whole lot. Their injuries were mostly internal. But police knew none of this at the time. Maybe they didn't want to know because it would mess up their theory. They definitely didn't try to know. They didn't call on any outside help except from the rumor mill. There are so many different reasons why this case was handled so poorly. Satanic panic, the public being involved when they shouldn't have been, the documentary that was made bringing out the best and worst in people, the West Memphis Police Department not letting the Arkansas State Police get involved because they wanted to prove that they could handle it, them not being able to handle a crime this big, quote-unquote experts who had little proof of knowledge and experience, the evidence testing being so backed up that a theory was made before there was any proof, the main detective, Gitchell, being about to retire, not arresting someone within the first 30 days, leading them to jump the gun on that 30th day, poor people wanting help from the police in exchange for their untrue testimony. All of these things led to the events that we will talk about next week in part 2, when 3 more boys become victims in a completely different way. But first, with all the information that we now know, do you have any ideas about what may have happened to these 3 boys, Michael Moore, Christopher Byers, and C.V. Branch?
I think I've been pretty obvious about what I think happened to them throughout the episode. And I've been trying so hard to not be biased throughout. Just let Sierra tell the story because, I'm not an expert on this case by any means. And I don't want to influence anyone's opinion. Like, you're entitled to your own opinion. We want to know yours, of course, guys. But I definitely think that Terry Hobbs had something to do with it. There's so much evidence that it's impossible not to think so. But then,
Yeah.
Mark is a horrible, horrible man, so it's possible that he had something to do with it as well.
Yeah.
I doubt that they were in cahoots.
What about the Bojangles guy?
I don't think he had anything to do with it.
What about the 2 ice cream truck people?
I don't know. That one's
You
a new
think-
one
Yeah.
that I haven't heard too much about, so gotta weigh. What are you thinking?
My thought,
Somebody
I think,
that's been immersed in it for 2
Oh, yeah.
weeks.
I think that the police thought Mark Byers did it.
Mm-hmm.
I think police were like the one with the brain tumor, who was also their informant and their broker. I think they thought he did it, and they thought if he was investigated for it, then more shit that they did illegally would come out. So they were trying to cover it up for him by blaming someone else.
Obviously, yeah. Oh.
I think they thought he did it, but I don't think he did it.
Okay. I'm on the same page as you so far.
Maybe he could have known more than he let on. Maybe he
Yeah.
knew it was going to happen. Maybe he was okay with the
Hence
thought
the
of
bad
someone
lying.
taking care of his troublesome stepson. Maybe he saw something, but I don't think he did it. I know that Terry Hobbs has been known to sue. He actually tried to sue one of the formerly known Dixie Chicks, now the Chicks members. So I want to say
Why?
that because
For
she
talking
slandered
about
him
this?
by saying that she thought he did it. So I want to say that all of these theories are strictly our opinions based on information we have researched, and our opinions should not be taken as fact. With that said, I'm going to say I think a lot, just saying.
I know. That's why I said earlier I'm not an expert.
Right.
This is just my opinion.
I think that Terry Hobbs hurt those boys.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where. Maybe in the woods, maybe at his house. I think that he forced Michael and Christopher to tie up his son, Stevie, which would explain why Stevie's right ties were different than his left ties. I think he made them undress Stevie and then themselves. I think he was doing this for sexual gratification through his anger. I think the boys listened to what he said without screaming or crying because he was an adult and you're supposed to listen and be scared of adults. I think that after he got his own gratification, he started to beat the boys, maybe mad at himself for enjoying watching kids, maybe mad at himself for enjoying watching specifically boys, maybe a little homophobia towards himself. I think that when the boys inevitably started to scream or cry, the easiest thing to do was to throw them in the water, dead or alive, to drown. Or maybe he just left them almost dead in the woods, and the man who went into Bojangles covered in blood had discovered the boys dead, maybe tried to help but couldn't, and then went into shock and cleaned up at Bojangles, not wanting to be blamed for what he stumbled into. And maybe later, I think Terry could have gone back to clean up. Or, if this was done at his house or someplace other than the woods, I think maybe he only beat them until they were unconscious. And then I think maybe he asked for help disposing of them. I think maybe he paid the man who went into Bojangles. I think he took his friend David out to the woods that night under the ruse of helping him look for the missing boys, but realistically because I think he was hoping to find them with a witness present to say, he was there when I found them.
Yep.
But I think the person who might have told, he might have told to hide them, hid them too well, and so they couldn't discover the bodies together. There are many, many scenarios that I think that all make much more sense than the conclusion that police eventually came to. But all of them, in my opinion, point to Terry Hobbs, a man who is still walking free today, a man who requested that the judge of West Memphis, quote unquote, do the right thing by having the old evidence destroyed, a man who wrote a book about his account of that night based on his old journal entries. His book is called Box Full of Nightmares. I don't plan to read it, but I've heard it's disturbing.
I don't doubt it. He's disturbing as fuck.
Yeah. I don't want to falsely accuse someone of a crime because that is exactly what happened the first time around in this case, and I'm not an investigator, but based on the evidence and the information I know, I think Terry looks good for it, and he should at least be a suspect. But he's not.
Holy shit. I feel like you deserve a round of applause.
These were my closing arguments
Yeah.
in my case.
Why are you not a lawyer, Sierra?
Because then I'd have to help people like Terry Hobbs.
Yeah,
no,
that's true.
thank you.
I think, can't you choose your clients? Like, if you don't want to, you can't, unless you're, like, court appointed, can't you just be like, I'm good?
Yeah, I guess so. I feel like I would never make money. I'd be too skeptical of everyone. Like, actually, you look real shitty right now, so.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, well, that was a good closing argument. I completely agree with everything you said.
Yeah.
I really think that Mark knew more. That's why his lies were shitty.
Yeah, Mark is a really, like, if you're going to watch any of it, which you should, some of it is really, they show pictures of the boys. Like, it's really disturbing.
Oh, like how they were
Paradise
found?
Lost, yeah.
Oh my god, really?
Yeah. Paradise Lost is the one on HBO.
One. Yeah.
There's 3 parts. There's three episodes, you know.
Yeah.
There's one that came out in 1999 or something, one in 2007, one in 2011, something like that. And Mark Byers is just insane in all of them. He lights the ground on fire. He yells at the world. He talks about how, I can't wait until you die, Damien Eccles. I'm going to come to your grave and spit on it every day. Like, he's crazy.
Oh.
But eventually, and we'll talk about it next week, he apologizes.
Okay.
He eventually, before he dies, he apologizes to Damien and says that, you know, the police led him wrong. He trusted the police, and now he doesn't.
He died in a car accident, if I remember correctly, right?
I am not sure how he died. I focused on the kids with as much evidence as I could, and then on the teens. I didn't look.
I remember being
too much
upset
into
about
the
it
adults.
in the sense that, like, if he did know anything, he can't be interviewed about it now.
Right.
But I don't 100% remember either. If you guys know, let us know. But great job.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you focused on the boys the way that you did.
Thank you. I tried.
I'm happy with how this is being told so far. And, you know, like I said, guys, we want to know your opinion too. And we are no experts. This is all our opinion.
Yes, all opinion. None of it is, I mean, some of it was fact, but the theories were all opinion, no fact.
Yeah, but the theories are based on fact, so.
Yeah. Yeah, so the funny thing was, and I know
So
you have to go, but
No, it's okay. You're good.
the funny thing was, when he sued, so he had never been interviewed, nothing. When he sued Natalie of, I think her name was Natalie, of the Chicks, for libel or slander or whatever, because she was, you know, one of the celebrities, including Johnny Depp and, you know, all these different people who were involved.
The photos of Johnny Depp and Damien Eccles together are so cute. If anyone has not seen them, go look at them. They look like they could be related. They're just little punks. I love it.
But so he sued her for talking about it. But the thing is, when you sue somebody, it opens you up for
investigation.
You think I'm lying? Now you have to prove that I'm not lying. Or you have to prove that I'm lying, or prove that, you know, what I'm saying about you. So that's why they questioned him so much after that. So he brought all of this upon himself by suing. So in a way, I'm kind of like, come at me. Let's get more information out of you.
Yeah, damn it, sir.
Yeah.
That was hard. I'm sorry you had to see photos. I didn't know they played that in that documentary.
There was that documentary, and there was another one called West of Memphis. And so the documentary, Paradise Lost, really focuses on Mark Byers. I believe it's at the very, very, very end of Paradise Lost when the stuff about Terry Hobbs finally comes out. West of Memphis focuses almost only on Terry Hobbs. So I watched the Paradise Lost one, then I watched West of Memphis, and I was like, man, both of these people definitely could have done it, and neither of them were looked at by police. So.
I don't like it, man.
Yeah.
I do not like it.
So that was that part. Next week we'll talk about trials and retrials and retrials and retrials.
Can't wait. No.
Yeah.
Hey, we said we were bringing you guys a banger. We hinted about it for 2 weeks. You knew what you were getting into.
Yep.
But it's, in all sincerity, thank you guys so much for listening to 100 plus episodes of this podcast, because we do bonus episodes and multiple parters like this one will be. And yeah, I'm just like incredibly humbled. We're still doing this and we're still growing. So thank you guys. We couldn't do it without you. And if you like the show, go leave a 5-star rating and review. Okay, thanks.
And follow us on Facebook.
Yeah, we made a new Facebook account because we gave up on trying to get access to mine after 2 years of Facebook not helping.
Yeah.
When mine was hacked. So yeah, if you used to follow that one, go find the new one. And yeah. But before we go, Sierra, what day is it today?
Today is February 14th, so happy Valentine's Day to everybody.
Aww.
I didn't make a big long thing because it is a busy episode.
I totally forgot about that. I could have had a fun fact about Valentine's Day.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone that it's Valentine's Day, and go have one of these delicious drinks, whether you're having it by yourself with a book or with a loved one.
Aw, happy Valentine's Day. And with that, we really love you guys. Happy Heart Day. And in the meantime,
keep it twisted.
Thank you for listening to Twisted and Uncorked podcast. Remember to leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you are listening now. It really is the best way to spread the word. You can also check out all of our sources and materials, as well as photos for the episode, on our website at twistedanduncorked.com. And you can follow us on social media at Twisted and Uncorked or Twisted_pod on Twitter. Thank you so much for all of your love and support, and we will see you next Tuesday for a brand new episode. Cheers!